Something I think is interesting as it relates to some of the recent stuff I've been posting about with concepts and networks is this evolutionary component and our reasoning, which maybe is a limit on how we do science and maybe what we're extracting when we're doing science. Let me get into that. So you can imagine in a petri dish, you have a bacterium and maybe you drop a little bit of sugar in there and it will utilize chemotaxis and maybe move towards the food source. The opposite would be the case if you put a little bit of bleach or something dangerous to it, it would move away from it. In this example, it doesn't really have a choice. It is responding directly to external stimuli. And at some point, as we move towards more complex organisms, there's a delay that occurs in response time. That response time creates a window in our evolutionary past to potentially generate and create something, a mechanism, some kind of biological structure, whatever, that is going to allow in this time delay possible reactions, possible directions of reactions to external stimuli. This is something that we don't see in lower life forms. So for example, as a human, if I'm kicked in the shin, I can sit there and choose an infinite possible paths to respond, right? So I can even generate imaginative cases on what if I do this, what if I do that? Or I could just cry, I could stand up, I could kick somebody back, whatever. That time delay allows this generation potential, right? Potentially this generation of this path of networks. Maybe these are very early areas of like the development of our cerebral cortex and this neural network that we traverse in our thinking. And it's very causal and temporal in relation in development, right? So what I mean by that is our interaction is with the external environment kind of dictates how this evolutionary product is produced. We observe things that take place in time because it could be our sensory apparatus and our at the frequencies of which we experience things, the time of which things are processed for us to experience it, etc. This interdependency is this evolutionary development that is causal in relationship and temporal. So we think very much in incremental cause and step sort of type of patterns that is potentially just a result of this neural network. And it kind of gives rise to our reasoning, which is interesting to think about, right? So if we have, like, say, a very simple deductive argument, maybe a modus ponens of all bachelors are unmarried male, John is an unmarried man, therefore John is a bachelor. If you present that as like a Venn diagram of the relationships between bachelor and unmarried male, you'll see that unmarried is larger and bachelor would be a subset in this Venn diagram. And that would be because that relationship in this node network type of concept thing is gives rise to this type of reasoning. Okay, so how we're traversing the network of concepts of the relationships between concepts gives rise to the reasoning that we execute when we think about things. So when we do science and we reduce them, if you've seen my previous video of how I talk about we reduce science to relationships of concepts in our language, how we communicate and how we describe and how we make sense of it. It is interesting to think that we are only kind of like, how can I describe it? I'm going to say limited, but I'd say biased, definitely biased towards this sort of reasoning, because we wouldn't reduce the external world through apparatus and experiments and through technologies so that we can experience it, only to translate it into something that doesn't follow our intrinsic reasoning pathways, right? That doesn't make sense. So thinking in terms of like an alien mind is very interesting, because what if they developed in their unique circumstances and place in the universe a different pattern of their alien neural network or whatever, a different type of association because of their unique experience of the external world, a different reasoning. And because they utilize different reasoning, maybe what they're able to extract and what they do extract, they come to different conclusions and patterns and recognition because they don't have the same reasoning apparatus that we do. So I think the neural nets that we have in our brain and how we create these large language models and what we're doing to advance science and technology, it's also, it's very interesting how it's kind of biased towards a particular type of reasoning that we execute, and it could be the product of like evolutionary development. Just something fun to think about.